This is insane. Buccaneers making shocking moves, shocking cuts. The 53-man roster has been set, and we got to talk about this because there are some players that made this team that we are surprised about, and there are teams that are not on this team that got waived off that we did not expect and were not predicting. I'm Sebastian with Buccaneers Digest. Welcome back, guys. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of players to talk about, specifically some big names that maybe some of us weren't expecting to be off the team this quickly, or maybe we have some hope that they'll make it back on, some players that we didn't think make the team but made it, all that good stuff. We'll be talking about it, but make sure to subscribe as 95% of the people who are watching aren't subscribed, so all you gotta do is hit the bell, hit the button, join the Bucs Digest. Let's get right into it, guys. The main story is Kyle Trask and Teddy Bridgewater, that competition for QB2. Who was gonna make it? Because Bridgewater was brought in pretty late in training camp, early in the preseason. He did not play, Bridgewater that is, for the Tennessee Titans preseason game 1. He played the game 2 with the Steelers and had 2 really good drives, threw 2 awesome touchdown balls, one to Bucky Irving, one to Emeka Egbuka. Some people are mad at Bridgewater for the throw that ended up injuring, Jalen McMillan. I wouldn't say that it was Teddy's fault. Some people called it hospital ball. I would not put that on Teddy. It was just an unfortunate incident that occurred. It's football. Those things unfortunately happen. But then game 3 comes around with the Bills. Bridgewater doesn't play because he's sick, but Kyle Trask plays, and overall it was a good performance in game 1, a really bad performance in game 2, and then in game 3, it was good, solid, okay, is how you could put it. How did this all amount up to? Because there's a lot of Kyle Trask tape, not as much Bridgewater tape, but the Bridgewater tape was really good, and then overall, this ends up in Kyle Trask being cut. He was going to go into his 5th season with the Buccaneers, but ends up being one of the guys that does not make the 53-man roster. We only have one backup quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, and that's kind of a big deal. Trask has been the backup quarterback for 4 years, 2 years behind Brady, 2 years behind Baker, and we were thinking maybe that we would carry 2 backup quarterbacks this season, but when you have Godwin and Wirfs, who are not going on the PUP list, but they'll be healthy scratches for first few games where they'll be taking up 2 spots on the 53-man roster, but not playing for at least the first couple of weeks. That means, you're just a bit more limited in what you can do, and we'll need more depth in those wide receiver, offensive line, all that kind of stuff, positions. So Trask ends up being kind of a casualty of that. You never know. Maybe he asked, hey, I want to be somewhere where I can play. The coaches with the Buccaneers didn't think that he had what it takes, because if you look back on the timeline of all of this, Baker had a moment where he got his hand hurt during training camp and was out for a couple practices. So Trask was working with the first team for a few days, and then shortly after, Bridgewater is brought in. So Rick Stroud was the one who made this analysis, and I really do agree that the timeline of that means that Trask probably wasn't playing very well. And it was also acknowledged by Bowles during the first preseason week that he had a good game, but the week of practice was not very good. And when you're working with the starters and are not playing very well, that's going to be a cause for concern. Bridgewater comes in and does not have much time to practice, doesn't have much time to learn the playbook, but then goes into that preseason game 2 and shows out, basically. And that's basically what led to this decision, a lot of those major factors there. And regarding what Todd Bowles had to say, not what Todd Bowles had to say, but Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report had to say regarding this move, is that the 33-year-old Bridgewater is a bargain in Tampa Bay at $1.255 million, and likely would have been paid more somewhere else. Think about Detroit and Las Vegas had he been released. Also, the Raiders just recently traded for Kenny Pickett. The Lions are probably still looking for a backup quarterback. Maybe Trask goes there. Maybe goes to the Jags. But overall, this is also a money situation where it's like they are holding on to this deal that they made with Bridgewater. A very cheap deal for an experienced quarterback, a journeyman quarterback, but who is very smart, has great leadership intangibles, And they know that if they were to cut him and maybe try and get him out of the practice squad, that there's a good chance he just goes to a different team. So that's kind of the game that they were playing with that. But regarding the comments that Todd Bowles was making, he said that obviously Bridgewater brings experience, but he brings a wealth of knowledge. He can command the offense right now. Him being older has a lot to do with it, but him being accurate and understanding what we're trying to do has a lot to do with it as well. And then he went on to say that with Trask, like the comparison with Trask and Bridgewater, he just says that Bridgewater gives us a better chance to win right now. And that's just, obviously Baker being the starter, but if there's ever a moment where we need Bridgewater to come in for, a half or a game, we don't feel like we're in completely uncharted territory, because with Trask, he hasn't played a full game. He hasn't started any games in the NFL, but despite going into his 5th season. And he only has a few snaps in the regular season. In preseason, it's been very shaky results. And I say this as a huge Trask fan. I'm a Gator alum, so I watched him play with the Gators and do really well. And his story was about someone who, in high school, he was a backup for a while, but then when his name was called, he rose to the occasion, played very well. And then the same thing happened in college with the Gators. He was backing up Felipe Franks, and then when he went down, Trask was called up and then performed exceptionally, where he earned the starting role and played really, really well for 2 years. And when he became, when he was going into the draft, he was also a Heisman finalist. People forget that. But when he went into the draft, people were really excited because it was right after the Bucs had won the Super Bowl. Tampa just wanted to add more depth to the team. We were pretty complete at the time. We got Tryon in the first round, and then pick 64, the last pick of the second round, is where we took Trask. And it's been criticized ever since. People didn't think that we needed a backup quarterback. We ended up getting Blaine Gabbert that year. But I think the idea that, Jason Licht and co was thinking was that, okay, we're going to get a young guy who is used to starting out his career as a backup, but then rising to the occasion when he needs it. But he'll be learning behind Tom Brady for a couple years. So that was the idea behind it. And then when Baker came in, there was a competition there, but then Baker proved to be the superior quarterback. And it really, in the end, I don't blame Trask for not being able to beat out those two guys. Brady being the best of all time, the greatest of all time, and then Baker, who is now a top 10 quarterback consensus, basically. I don't hold it against him, but at the same time, the preseason performances, all these different things, it hasn't shown enough to the coaching staff to keep him around. They think that an experienced veteran, because we're trying to make a Super Bowl push here, the experienced veteran is the easier way to go, the better way to go when it comes to, in crunch time, if we need someone to come in and kind of, steer the ship a bit if things get bad in the quarterback room with Baker, just regarding injuries or all that. So we all wish Trask the best, but that is just kind of the end of the Trask era in Tampa Bay. Bazelak is looking, he was also cut, but it looks like they're trying to keep him on the practice squad because he had a couple good performances with the Bucs preseason games. So, but anyway, just as a fan of Trask, I know there's a lot of Gator Bucs fans out there. We all wish him the best. It's a little frustrating to see just kind of how his career here went. We all were thinking maybe he'll be the starter, but it just never really panned out. And but we're still rooting hard for our Buccaneers, and hopefully Trask does well wherever he goes, unless it's like NFC South rival. But yeah, Bridgewater is the guy. That is the quarterback 2 situation that has been decided. And then next big thing that's kind of come out is that John Bullock was the backup linebacker that was selected to be on the 53-man roster, and not Nick Jackson. So Bullock kind of went even more under the radar than Nick Jackson did. Nick had a bit more splash plays going on, which is why everyone was talking about him, including us. But Bullock was the one who actually made it over Nick Jackson. Nick Jackson was waived off, which is really unfortunate and heartbreaking. But it's important to know that sometimes the best 53 isn't always the right 53, because sometimes we need players who are really good on a special teams play, who maybe won't be as good as a backup inside linebacker, but it's where we need them in terms of just the placement, where they fit best, how they perform in that role. That's what they mean by the right 53. So maybe Nick Jackson wasn't the best special team tackler guy who can like run down the field on punts or kick returns. Maybe he wasn't the best at that, but he was really good at ball skills, finding the ball on defense as an inside linebacker. So that's just something that's worth noting. But anyway, what they had to say, what Scott Reynolds had to say from Pewter Report, said that one could argue that Nick Jackson has a bit more upside as an inside linebacker than fellow undrafted free agent John Bullock. They were both undrafted free agents, by the way. Jackson led the Bucs with 14 tackles in the preseason and was tied for the lead with a pair of sacks in addition to an interception and a pair of pass breakups. The Bucs like Bullock's production on defense as well. He finished with 8 tackles, a sack, and 2 pass breakups, but Bullock had 4 special teams tackles in August, including 3 in the preseason finale against Buffalo, and he was considered to be the better special teams player. That's why he made the roster over Jackson. And so, while I and maybe other Bucs fans mourn, the cutting of Nick Jackson, this isn't necessarily the end because you never know if he gets brought back onto the practice squad, if he clears waivers by tomorrow on Wednesday, if no other team picks him up, we will have that chance to bring him onto the practice squad. And then, maybe he'll be brought back to dress up for the Bucs later on in the season. I mean, hopefully there's no injuries that end up happening with, Sebastian Georgiev and Lavonte David and all those guys. But, shout out to Bullock. Just because we didn't see the splash plays doesn't mean he's not the better player and won't help the Buccaneers in the way that Nick Jackson would. It's very easy to get lost in the sauce. Just like in the draft, we'll get really in love with a certain player, a certain prospect. But maybe it's not who the coaches and the GM is looking for. Maybe that's not where they see the strength of the team really being pushed to its limits. They feel we can use a player of maybe a little less talent but fits our scheme better, or something like that. So it's a really interesting chess match that you kind of have to do when building a roster and building a team. Some teams just say always pick the best man. So it feels kind of like that's how the Eagles roll. But it'll be interesting to see those two squads go up against each other in Week 4 and who prevails, because we've definitely been owning them lately. So that's just been kind of a little bit of a bummer there. Also, Desmond Watson was let go. That was the player from Florida, another Florida player who was over 450 pounds. He was tasked with losing weight during training camp, or just over the entire summer really. He never really got to the target weight that they wanted, so he was cut. I mean, Bowles had to say listen, if you don't practice, you're probably not going to make the team. It's just as simple as that. I understand that. A lot of fans will understand that. It's just a bummer because a lot of guys are rooting for him. But it is also important to note that Todd Bowles did say this in his press conference this morning. The door is not closed on him, but if you don't practice, you're probably not going to make this team. And then we'll see where we are in a couple of weeks, and we'll circle back, and then we'll go from there. So, okay, I'm excited about, this is another player where the door's not closed. Kyle Trask, that door is closed. But Desmond Watson, you could always see another team taking a chance on him by Wednesday's waiver wire deadline. But at the same time, if that doesn't happen, then we can still be communicating with Desmond saying, listen, if you get to the weight that we still tasked you with within the next month, we'll bring you onto the practice squad, maybe even bring you onto the roster so that we can get ready for the Eagles game or the Bills game, two teams that are known for the tush push or QB sneaking and everything like that. And we know that him next to Vita Vea would just be a sight to behold. It would terrify defenses. Now, but we'll see if he's able to make it there. Right now, he is not on the team. And it was an unfortunate cut, but at the same time, it's a lot of weight they're asking him to lose. It's just a hard process. We're all still rooting for him in the sense that it would be cool to see him on the practice squad and as a possibility to be in a Bucs uniform during the regular season. So I'm not giving up on that. It doesn't seem like Todd Bowles is either. It just made sense for it to make the 53-man roster as of right now. That's what they had to do, just regarding getting the guys that they need on the 53. So that's another unfortunate event in my opinion. And then Trey Palmer, as we discussed before, he was waived. He was a 6th round pick that had 51 catches. 557 yards and 4 touchdowns in his career with the Buccaneers, and so we had to let him go. I mean, there was a time a couple years ago when Baker's first year with us, he was the wide receiver 3 for the Buccaneers. He was catching touchdowns. I was at the Eagles playoff game in the wild card round, and where he caught that long touchdown ball when the Eagles forgot how to tackle. But we're at the point now where this receiver room is so loaded. Even with Jalen McMillan on the IR, we just didn't have space for him in terms of what we need. But it's just very interesting to see how that's kind of panned out. Just very quickly, the receiver room got too loaded. Tez Johnson has earned his way onto the 53-man roster, as we all expected. And Ryan Miller, he also made it on. Actually, let's look at the list here of the players that made the list overall, or the receiving room, that is, specifically. So Evans, obviously, Emeka Egbuka, Sterling Shepard made it, Tez Johnson, Ryan Miller, and then Cameron Johnson, who didn't have the best preseason by any means. But I think it's important to note that, like we said before, not necessarily the best 53, but the right 53. Punt returns, special teams. He looked pretty good on the return game. The Bucs are really excited about having a strong return game potentially. It's going to be a bit different now because the touchback brings you to the 35-yard line. So teams are being incentivized to kick not into the end zone, so that players are forced to return the ball so you can tackle them before they make it to the 30 or 35-yard line. So we're trying to get really good returners. That's going to be a bigger part of this season. So they believe that Johnson was a better return man than Trey Palmer. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get any trade requests or offers for Trey Palmer, so he was just cut and waived off. But I do expect him to be on another team relatively shortly. He deserves that other chance. But yeah, so Johnson was the guy who made that last one. Garrett Green, someone who had some really good plays this preseason, also was cut, did not make the team. Bit of a bummer there. He had a cool touchdown at the end of the Bills preseason game, but it was not enough to let him make the team. We'll see if he goes somewhere else or if he makes the practice squad, everything like that. But this is the current setup for the Buccaneers and their receiving room, which, it's not too shabby, I think a lot of people would say. And then Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report. Lastly, I had to say regarding the defense, Vildor, he did make the team. We did a video about him. He showed in the preseason that he can play outside cornerback at 5'11", 189 pounds, but also inside a nickelback in a pinch. He's also more fluid and a tick faster than Hall is. Hall was also cut. And Vildor is a better special teams player, which is key for a reserve cornerback. So when you are versatile like that, just like John Bullock was at linebacker, where maybe Nick Jackson wasn't as good of a special teamer, that gives you the extra edge in order to make the team. And so that's kind of what gave Vildor the edge here. He did make some really good plays. He had some great pass breakups, an interception in the Steelers game. It's just cool to see guys make plays, and that ends up making them make the team. And it's just good to have a guy that you feel relatively confident in. I mean, maybe we're wrong because it was preseason. Like, that interception did come against Skylar Thompson. It wasn't like an Aaron Rodgers interception. But at the same time, he was a playmaker. He batted the ball, caught it himself, and returned it. I feel like that was a great showcase of what he's capable of. He has a really good knack for getting near the ball. He's a really good tackler. He almost had a second interception that same game. So I'm happy he's on the team. And whereas obviously we hope that it's Dean, it's Zion McCollum, we have Parrish, we have Benjamin Morrison, who looks like he's on track to maybe still play for week 1 against the Falcons. He still hasn't practiced all month, so I have a bit of a concern there. But it's good having Vildor here, and he will be a crucial part, because as we know, the Bucs have had problems where just defensively, especially in the secondary, we feel like we fall into the reserve guys pretty quickly early in the season. Maybe we can avoid that. I would be very relieved if we could, but Benjamin Morrison already dealing with some stuff. J.J. Roberts, he was a safety that was looking really promising. He's out for the season, and Dean, he has injury problems in the past, so it's just, we got to be aware. We got to be ready. These guys got to be young and just, ready to go. And I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. But overall, those are the big names that have been cut, have made the team. Overall, I want to ask you guys, what are your takeaways? Is there anyone that you really bummed didn't make the team, like a Nick Jackson or a Green or a Watson, anyone like that, Trask, like etc.? Let me know. Are you excited that Vildor made the team? Are you excited about Bullock? There's other guys that definitely have earned this opportunity. Maybe they weren't splashing on the screen necessarily, but overall, it's just a matter of I trust this coaching group. I trust our GM. He's the best GM that the Bucs have had. And just overall, I until they prove me wrong, where it's like it's a disaster, I will continue to be behind them in that sense. But maybe you guys feel differently. Let me know in the comments below if you are a fan of these cuts of these guys who have made it, and we'll talk about it. There's probably going to be some more moves made. Like we said, waiver wire is tomorrow. They'll be talking about maybe getting some free agents to come in. There's more moves that are coming down the line. Micah Parsons is still available, or well, not available, but he's still requesting a trade. Trey Hendrickson did sign a 1-year deal, so maybe we can get him next free agency. And but all those things are really interesting. There's a lot more that's still to happen. So stay subscribed, subscribe if you're not, and stay tuned for all things Buccaneers here. And very excited to get this season started because we're done with the preseason now, and 53-man roster has been set. So let's get this thing going, guys. We got a lot more. The excitement is ramping up. You can feel it. We're almost there, but I will see y'all in the next video.